Hello and welcome to the Divorce Discussions. I'm Angie Weber, a parent coach supporting co-parents through their journey and also the director of the Divorce Support Collective. At the collective, our mission is to reimagine the process of divorce through collaboration and support from contemplation to thriving post-decree. Now we're excited to bring you another episode of Divorce Discussions where we sit down with professionals who are helping individuals navigate divorce with confidence, clarity, and care. Our goal is to inspire, educate, and empower you. And today I am so excited to introduce all of you to Jill Kaufman. She is a divorce coach, therapist, and co-parenting expert with years of experience. Through her book, online courses, and group coaching, she helps support those on this journey. So thank you very much for joining me today, Jill.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I am excited to get into so many questions with you, but I want to clarify something right when we start here, because as I said, you are a therapist and you are also a co-parenting expert. So can you just and a divorce coach. So can you kind of walk me through the difference between a divorce coach and a therapist for those wondering?
Absolutely. I get this question a lot. So a therapist is someone who diagnoses people like they have anxiety or depression or, a ton of other diagnosable um, situations. And they will have a certain way to work with clients. And sometimes you're looking into the past, like your childhood, and seeing what caused you to be or have these behaviors or things that happened, a long time ago. And so it's focused on what happened in the past and how it impacts you, and it's focused on treating a specific condition. Whereas a divorce coach is really present and future focused. There are goals to your work, and you're very focused on getting those goals accomplished. So, where a therapist, you may just kind of vent for a session or for many sessions, and that could feel really good, and you need that. You wouldn't be doing that with a divorce coach. You would really have some specific tasks that you want to accomplish. And with the divorce coach specifically, it's getting through the practical part of divorce. But you do need to deal with the emotional piece of divorce too, because it's very hard to think clearly when you're being emotional. So that we would give tools that can help you be less emotional. I run a group, and having other people around who are going through similar things, I find is very healing for people, and it makes you feel not so isolated. So that's a part of what a divorce coach will do. We'll try to normalize what you're feeling by being around other people who are feeling similar things and experiencing similar things. So it is a very different way to work with people. The people who I'm a therapist for, I don't coach, and vice versa. A lot of times they will have, like, people I'm coaching will have a therapist too, because that's a totally different way to work with someone.
Yeah, and keeping those ethical boundaries there as well is super important. But I love that you're there to support them with some of the practical things that they're able to implement right away. And I love the aspect of group coaching because a lot of times when we go through something traumatic or hard or challenging, such as a divorce, we can feel like we're the only ones going through that. And so to know that there's other people, so we're not so alone, is incredibly important. Now, do you work with people who are at all different stages of divorce, or do you prefer to work with people who are kind of at the very beginning so you can help them shorten their maybe emotional journey a little bit more?
I mean, ideally, I would work with people in the beginning, because if I get people in the middle, they've already probably made some mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And you can't get any of that money or time or energy back. But I work with people, who are thinking about divorce or going through divorce, beginning, middle. Towards the end, they wouldn't need me because they're probably almost done. And I do have, I may be starting with another colleague, a post-divorce group, but I personally don't work with people post-divorce.
Yeah, yeah, understandable. And we don't know what we don't know. And that is why the Divorce Support Collective is there for individuals and why we're doing these divorce discussions. So, if people are starting out in their divorce journey, what is maybe a tip or two to have them start out on the right foot?
Oh, I could go on for a long time on this. Um, I So many people start their divorce, which I did too. They find a divorce attorney, they give the divorce attorney a retainer, and that's how they think they should start their divorce. And it's getting out there more than when I went through this, way back in 2012. That's not the way to do it because what happens is a divorce attorney is an expert in the law, but the law is only about 10% of your divorce.
Mm.
Another 10% is financial and about 80% is emotional. So, if you can get a handle on the emotional piece of it, you can use your attorney when you need them, but you don't start with them. You start working with someone who's like me, who's a divorce coach, or you could work with a therapist. They're not going to give you the practical skills to get through your divorce, but a divorce coach would help you kind of develop a plan on when to hire your attorney, how to hire your attorney, if you need a financial person. Like attorneys also will advise you on financial parts of your divorce, but that's not usually their expertise. So you're wasting a lot of time and money working with an attorney on like creating a budget or, looking through your bank statements and credit card statements, like that's not the best way to use your attorney. So what I say as a divorce coach is once you hire me or someone like me, look into mediation,
Mm.
because mediation is a real practical tool that you can use to get through your divorce. That's less expensive than using two attorneys or going to court or anything else. It's more amicable. You have one neutral professional working with the two parties. And, a lot of people are like, well, my soon-to-be ex is really high conflict. They can't, I can't sit in a room with them and work through all this. Well, that's the mediator's job. That's what they're trained to do. I'm actually a trained divorce mediator also, and I've done it in the past. I don't really do it much now, but it's really um, getting a trained mediator who's got a lot of good experience. They know how to handle people who are high conflict in addition to people who are not. So um, that's how I would start the process.
Yeah, I think that's great advice because, as you said, 80% is emotional. And I always like to tell people as well, like, that's why, again, we started this organization is because we wanted to make sure people knew that there were so many different types of support out there that can kind of come together as a whole. And it doesn't have to be necessarily just going and getting that lawyer. Lawyers are great, they definitely have a place. But if you're spending money to talk to your lawyer like you would talk to a divorce coach or a therapist, you're going to be paying a really expensive bill.
I did that. I did that. I wasted a ton of money doing that. I kept getting bills and I'm like, how did that we run up that bill? But I was
Yeah.
venting to my
Yeah.
attorney. And yeah, it's
Yeah.
not good.
Exactly. Now, I know again, as you said, like you have a lot of experience with high conflict situations. So I would love maybe again another tip or two to listeners if they are in that boat of, well, yeah, my ex or soon to be ex is very high conflict. I don't know how to communicate with them. We don't see eye to eye on everything. Do you have a tip or two that you could share with those listeners if that's what they're struggling with right now?
Absolutely. So it's really important that you make a shift in your mindset because you're not going to be married to this person anymore. That's not the relationship that you have currently. Right now, the relationship when you're going through divorce has to change. So it doesn't matter what your soon to be ex thinks about what you're doing or what they feel about anything. That was important when you were married. You had to care about how they feel and you had to get to agreement with them on all the things that you're doing every day. That is not the same relationship when you're going through divorce and when you're going to be co-parents. You really are more like colleagues and coworkers. And that's not to say that if you do have an amicable situation, you can't be friends. Some people can, and that's great. But usually, high conflict people, that's not so easy. So you're really should be thinking about each other as like a colleague, a coworker, someone that you have to get the emotion out of what you're doing. And um, when you're thinking emotionally, you're not going to be able to communicate in the best way.
Mhm.
And you really want to have respectful, non-emotional communication where you don't talk about the past. You just talk about what you need to talk about with each other related to the children or the divorce or whatever it is that you
Yeah.
need to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So making that mind shift is really, really important.
Yeah, and again, using other professionals like yourself in that area to be able to use as venting or to be able to talk through and process versus doing that with your ex, especially if they are high conflict. And I loved how you said it's the relationship that you have right now. It's not a romantic relationship anymore if you're getting divorced, but it's a different type of relationship. And before we hit record, we were talking about that as well. Is this, especially if you have kids, you have a new type of relationship with your ex, and it's not that you don't have a relationship with them. It just looks a lot different, and so. I would love to talk a little bit for those because we know not everyone who gets divorced has children. However, a lot of people do, and co-parenting can be really tough. And so, what was your biggest suggestion, or, maybe again, another tip or two of how do we protect the children going through this, especially if it is high conflict?
So, having a functional, respectful relationship with the children's other parent protects the children. When there's tension there, when there's anger, when there's fighting, children are negatively impacted. I have a client where they just had their college graduation of their child and they worked it out so they didn't see each other. So the child had to navigate, okay, I'm spending this time with dad and this time with mom. And that's really tough on children. And it's not ideal. And, sometimes you have to do it because some people are so difficult. I understand that. But if it all possible that you can be in the same room with each other when you're dealing with birthdays or whatever it is that come up with for children, that is the best. If you can just be respectful and kind to each other for the children's sake. The other thing is, when your soon to be ex says something or sends an email or letter that is triggering, take some time before you respond. Because if you respond right away, and I did this so much, I would write in the text, what the hell are you talking, like all these like
Yeah.
reactive statements. And then I was like, okay, erase, like I have to think about this before I respond. And ChatGPT is great. I didn't have that when I was going through divorce. So put it into ChatGPT, ask how you should respond, if you should respond at all, and you can get an answer. And that will give you a little space so that you're not reacting right away.
Yeah, I love the idea of being proactive versus reactive because I think a lot of us have done that before in our lives. In those going through divorce, it can be easy to do that because again, there's so much of those emotions happening within that, and so taking that pause, which can be really challenging in a lot of different areas of our life. And I love the idea of using AI not as necessarily as a copy and paste back, but also to really understand like, okay, how is this coming off? Because of course, if it's through email or text, communication can, get misinterpreted a lot through those types of channels of communication. So
Yeah.
I
I
think
can't
that,
I can't tell you how many times clients have sent me an email they were going to send to their soon to be ex, and I'm like, and they thought it was fine. And I'm like, oh no, 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 you can't say that because they're just caught up. You're caught up in the emotion and you don't realize you're not objective when you write an email or think about things.
absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot when people are going through a divorce, the emotions come up a lot, and it's a lot of, well, I need to tell you my side of the story and tell you how wrong they are, which again is great when you have a coach or a therapist for that person to vent to, but also to kind of, when we talk to family and friends, they can be a little bit biased because they're emotionally involved as well. And so talking to a third party can really be helpful to give that different perspective. So again, we make sure that we're moving forward with the best mindset, as you said, really controlling it versus letting those emotions lead, because that's when it typically can escalate quite a bit. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, Jill, are there any other tips that you have for the listeners right now on just if they're starting out in that divorce and they feel extremely overwhelmed with where to even go first?
Yeah, one of the best things I can recommend to people is when you're stuck in all the anger, sadness, all the emotions that maybe shame, grief, all those emotions that you're going through. remember that this is a time period that you're going through this. This will end, right? Your divorce will be over. And then you have a really cool opportunity to have any kind of life that you want going forward. So the more you start thinking about what you want that life to be like and what you can do in your post-divorce life, the more you're going to get done with all the grieving and the sadness and the anger, and move forward in your life. And so it takes time, it doesn't happen overnight, but even just starting that realization that you can start thinking about what your post-divorce life is, will help you in the healing process.
Yeah, and knowing that it might take a little while too. Like we don't have to have everything figured out the day that those papers are signed. It's kind of through different seasons, through ebbs and flows of, what does this next chapter look like? And knowing that you really get to be the author of that and decide what you want to do. Now, I have one more question for you though, as you were sharing that, Jill, just if they do have children, how much should the child be involved in what is going on in the divorce?
As little as possible. I mean, children don't want to hear it. When they hear it, even if they say they want to hear it, it's upsetting to them. So you really want to protect children when there are, high conflict situations. I mean, children just need to know what is relevant to them, where they're going to go to school, where they're going to live, how much time they're spending at each parent's house. Those types of things are important to share with children, but anything about anything else that has nothing to do with them, you really want to keep from them. And you don't realize, but they have big ears. They're going to be in the house. They're going to hear you talking on the phone. They're going to sense, your tension. So you really want to take care of yourself and really, not talk about it when they're around.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I always like to say when I'm coaching with parents that kids watch us all of the time, even when we don't want them to. So sometimes we can see them model behavior that we don't necessarily want them to. Yet if we really sit back and become aware, is most of the time it's from things that they picked up on us. So I think keeping the children safe and not getting them involved as much as possible, no matter what your thoughts are about your soon-to-be ex, is extremely important part of the conversation as well. So Jill, thank you so much for coming on and just sharing a little bit more about what you do as a divorce coach and how it can help people thrive again through that contemplation to thriving post-decree journey. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Um, well, I have a free Facebook group. It's called Separation and Divorce Support Community, and I go live in there every week, and people post things, and it's a really great way for you to get support, without, spending anything. And I highly recommend people join some kind of a group to get support because it is one of the most difficult situations, difficult life experiences that anyone can have.
Sure, absolutely. Well, again, Jill, thank you so much for your time. Listeners and watchers, please make sure you head to the notes because you are going to be able to get connected with Jill and learn more about her, get into that group if that is the type of support you're seeking, or reach out to her personally if you are looking for a divorce coach. So thank you again, Jill, for hanging out. And for all of you viewers, make sure you stay tuned for more divorce discussions coming up next. And then also make sure you go to the divorcesupportcollective.com to find additional resources and support for any stage of divorce.